everyone, welcome back to the Mind Dream Investment Adventure. Our goal throughout this whole series is to help Joe purchase an out-of-state property. So if this is your first time joining us, let me fill you in on a little bit about what we've discussed in previous episodes. So far, we've helped Joe determine his strategy. We've actually nailed down the market that he is going to invest in, which is going to be Atlanta. Then we helped him review and analyze several deals. We had some that actually didn't work out, but we had one that did. Joe actually purchased his property out of state. We did all of the due diligence. We got a rehab crew in. We got the property made ready. Then we helped Joe find and identify the right property management company. And now we are working on the investment strategy to make sure that he gets the most return on his investment. Okay, so we know that Joe is in the military and he's very busy. Now, again, the reason that you buy real estate is not to be busier. It's to leverage out people and systems so that you can do whatever you want to do. So we're going to give Joe a little bit of a break, and we're going to welcome our head of marketing at Mynd Property Management, Vivian Lwin, and we're going to talk about leasing Joe's property out for him. At this point, the investing process is all done. Now it's time for the property management company to step in and really do the heavy lifting of advertising the property, screening the tenants, leasing the property, and making sure that the move-in goes smoothly. Today, we're going to be talking about the entire leasing process at Joe's property. Now, one thing you want to remember is everything lives and breathes on how good of a job you do on putting the right tenant in. Just putting a tenant in the property is not always going to ensure success. So we're going to hop on a call with Vivian. We're going to hear about her approach to leasing. But before we do, make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe to this video on BiggerPockets so that you can get more information like this in the future. Welcome, Vivian. It's good to have you on the show today to find out the leasing process about how we're going to get Joe's property leased.
Thanks, Steve. It's so great to be here. I know that the team has been working really hard on Joe's property. A lot of things happening behind the scenes. We helped Joe purchase this property remotely, and all of this is being done virtually. And for all the viewers out there, there are property management companies all over. You want to find the right one for you. I'll be sharing some of the things that Mynd does that is very similar to a lot of other property management companies and things that we do differently. Mynd uses a lot of data and technology to help improve the process, to help get the right tenants and things like that. So happy to share today.
So Vivian, let's start off with talking about working with a property management company and everything that's involved in that whole leasing process. Specifically, walk us through when you first met Joe virtually and you did the whole onboarding process and how Mynd approaches the whole leasing process with him as well as his property.
Yeah, Steve. So it's interesting, depending on what kind of property manager you go with, it'll be a little bit different, but this process is more or less similar. At Mynd, every property owner has a dedicated portfolio manager. It's like their single point of contact. And in that process, we really do the due diligence of understanding the owner, the property, if they have preferences, what's happening with the property. Some properties come in and they're vacant. Some properties come in and they need remodeling. So every situation is a little bit different. And that auditing and that due diligence process happens with Mynd. That's also the point in time where the property owner, i.e. Joe in this case, gets acquainted with their main point of contact. Now, in Joe's situation, his property needed some work, so we had to sit down and really help him through that process, as you've seen in episode 5, the remodeling, making sure that they're not overspending, underspending, make sure it's on time, and really trying to parallel path, because as you know, Steve, time is money. So every single day that a unit is vacant, that's money out of the owner's pocket, and Mynd takes that really, really seriously. So Mynd did all of this kind of virtual. This whole onboarding process can be virtual also. And we created a plan for them. Wherever possible, Mynd will pre-lease. That's not always available. For example, if you need to remodel and that the pictures are going to be a lot nicer for the leasing and marketing process afterwards, you would not necessarily pre-lease and then try to get a tenant in at a lower price. We would want to do that when we have like the best pictures. So every case is a little bit different, but I think the Mynd approach is, as fast as possible and as much as possible, a lot of parallel pathing whenever possible.
Okay, thanks, Vivian. That's great. And one of the things you really want to remember when you're an investor, whether you're investing locally or out of state, is always make sure that you set the proper expectations with you and the property management company. This is why it's so important that everyone is on the same page and knows what is going on, time frames, expectations, all of this, because sometimes things get lost in translation. So again, it's just one of those things you always want to make sure. So, Vivian, after you did the initial onboarding and the process overview, how did you get the property leased?
Yeah, absolutely. So after that piece, and especially after the remodel, when we feel like the property is in its best condition for advertising, the first thing that we do is take pictures, because in the advertising process, the pictures are one of the most important things. They impact prospective residents coming in way more than other things like the text and the copy. So pictures are key. At Mind, we also do 3D kind of maps and things like that. So really to kind of create that profile of your property and making sure that it's the content is there for advertising.
And okay, so now after the photos are taken, how do you guys advertise the property, and what does that process look like?
Yeah, so advertising the property, and this is where sort of Mind is a little bit different. If you were joining kind of like a smaller mom and pop shop company and they don't have the technology or the platform to do it, it might be very manual. But at Mind, we take all of the assets and the content, and what we do is we use a platform to kind of syndicate all of that content out in the advertising process. So you don't have to manually update this on a Zillow and then a Redfin and then all of these different sites. So Mind has a lot of sites. I believe it's about 40 sites. And those are kind of a couple of the places that we advertise, but it goes all out, at the same time, so that we, cast the widest web possible. That's very, very important to do in an efficient way. If not, you're just wasting a lot of time. It could take days, and that's a lot of money out of the owner's pocket if it's not streamlined. So I actually have Joe's profile pulled up from our system, and I can tell you, some of the places that we got a lot of great leads were the MLS, apartment.com, Zumper, Hot Pads. We have our own, Rent Links, Zillow, Trulia. And Joe's property was very successful. It was marketed and leased within 5 days, which is a very, very short amount of time. We had a total of 173 prospects for the property. We actually showed the property 28 times within that time period, had 3 applications in which those applicants paid to apply, and 27 others partially completed applications. So it was full speed ahead and a very successful screening process, advertising process.
Wow, it sounds like there was a lot of action at his property getting it leased. So let me ask you this. During the process for Joe, how does he see that information? Or really anyone that Mynd Property Management manages for, how do you see that process to get insight so that if I owned a property, I would know all this is happening?
Yeah, Steve, that's a really great question. I think a great property manager will always give you visibility to that information because, as a property owner, and I know this because my family invests in a lot of property as well, that is just a very, anxious time. And at Mind, this is where where we can use data and technology to really empower transparency in the process. So with any Mind owner, they have full access to our owner portal, which gives them number of prospects, number of showings, and number of applications. And that is kind of live. So they can always see, the pipeline that's happening. And, they can log in anytime. It's basically property level data at their fingertips, not just with the leasing process, with a lot more, but as it pertains to the leasing process, all the visibility is there. Once the resident comes in, they also have an app, but that's kind of a different story. To answer your question, the owner has full visibility into the process at any given time.
That's great. And I agree. As an owner myself, I like the fact that you can see everything going on during the process because, again, the information, knowing what's happening is key, especially when you are investing out of state and you can't be there to actually physically see what's going on. Now, when it comes to screening the resident and actually signing the lease and all of that to get it rented, how does Mynd do that process?
So Steve, I think that's also a really, really great question. And it's a very important process because it's not just about getting anybody in, heads in beds, as you say. It's about getting the right tenant, and Mind takes that, responsibility very seriously, and we have a very systematic way to do this. We have partners in the screening process and things like that. But ultimately, I think for everybody out there, you want to make sure that your property manager has a process, and that you buy into the process and you understand the quality of the tenants and things like that. At Mind, we follow very specific criteria. We look at credit history, criminal background history, employment history, rental history, income, which is usually about 3.5 times the rent amount. And then it's kind of like a first come first serve to be fair, and it's very important to be fair because there's a lot of regulations around that. Um, and then work with the owners and the tenants on all the other little aspects of that. When a tenant goes through the process, they're typically scored as approved with condition, or denied. And in the process, the owner, because we have this protocol, and we walk the owner through it, the owners really don't have to be that involved because there's all of these thresholds that a potential tenant must meet before they get to the point of being approved. And Steve, one thing I would really like to point out is either any owners out there who are attempting to do this themselves, like self-manage and want to do the screening and the leasing, or if they're working with a property management company that doesn't have these policies, kind of tight. I will say that one of the most important pieces is to follow fair housing practices because you do not want to get sued in the process. So, there are ways that you need to advertise and screen, and you cannot discriminate, and all of those things kind of come into play. Mind has legal counsel like on our team that really ensures that we're following best practices and that we won't get the owner, in any kind of like legal trouble.
It sounds like you and the team were really able to find a good tenant and get that tenant into the property with the proper screening. And I know firsthand that many times problems start and stop with the wrong tenant. So you can avoid a lot of problems, whether it's you leasing it out yourself or you're hiring a management company, by putting just the right tenant in. And sometimes it's so important to slow down and make sure that you do the proper screening. And that is one thing that you do not want to rush or cut any corners on. So Vivian, what's needed now to get the residents moved into the property?
Yeah, at that point, the property is pretty much move-in ready. However, when the tenant comes in, they may view the property and we might make notations or there's some final follow-up thing. So that kind of happens in the property, but most everything is ready. It's just coordinating with the tenant to make sure that they're getting the keys at the right time, and making sure that they feel comfortable, they know where everything is, answering all of their questions. Because as a property manager, you do serve the owners, but you also serve the residents. So moving them in and making them feel welcomed and addressing their concerns and questions are a part of that move-in process as well. And having them get acquainted to the property managers at the time.
So Vivian, it sounds like Mind really does a lot, which is great. And we all know today technology is key, especially in the environment that we're all currently in. Tell me, what does Mind do to actually stay on top of this with the technology to make sure that we're on the cutting edge to give both owners and residents the ability to have their properties rented, safe, secure, and everything else that goes on with being an investor?
Yeah, I talked a lot about just kind of like the more of the regular process that an owner goes through when they're at this stage. But when you partner with a company like Mind, where it's very technology focused, and I will say that it's not that the technology and the data replaces any of the human aspects to it, because at the end of the day, it is a service company and we have people. But I will say that the data and the technology really enables a company to improve their service constantly by measuring what's happening. So, at Mind, we take customer satisfaction surveys at every part of the process, at every repairs and maintenance, after a resident is moved in, all of that. And that enables, the company to track what needs improvement, and continue to improve and things like that. But it also enables us to integrate, new and innovative ways to adapt to the changing times, where potentially like remote investing or remote renting or things like that, the physical aspect doesn't get in the way. So a couple of examples of that are Mind has integrated things like self bookings for showings, self showings where people are able to come, residents are able to come in and view the property without the pressure of a salesperson, but also put the security protocols in place to make sure that we know exactly when the resident is in. We give them a code. We know when they leave the property, we can have their ID stored. All of that stuff is very, very important and actually increases the service and increases the time that residents, prospective residents come into the property. And one thing about more of a tech-enabled kind of company and property management company is that, you buy into the service once and, we're constantly improving. So it's not like you're paying for more from the team learning, and the team can learn, very quickly. But they're constantly improving and you're constantly getting the benefits of what technology and data, can do. So I think that's just a thought to leave in mind as everybody is looking for the right property manager, is, what value are you getting? Is this aligned with your expectations and all of that?
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think something just to kind of close that out, I think what's key here is anything that causes less friction between client and customer with using technology, to me, is the key. So anything that's an app and a gadget, as long as it's easing frustration and it's making things easier, that's where you're going to find success. And obviously getting Joe's property leased so quickly by using the data and seeing the actual numbers, which tell you a story that things were going correctly, that's great to be able to see that data and see that the systems did work. And with Joe being out of state, whether he was living nearby or in another country, he's able to look at that information and see what is going on. So after all this, you've got Joe's property rented and he has residents in his property now. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct, Steve. Everything's been done. We actually got a tenant in and rent's being collected. So, Joe's in a happy place, and so is the tenant.
Awesome, Viv. Well, thanks so much for the recap. As an investor, it's always a good feeling to know that the process and the systems work. Joe got a property. He never set foot in that city. He purchased it. He got it rented. He is now getting cash flow. That is the perfect scenario. So everyone, we are in the final stages of Joe's dream investment adventure to help him find a property out of state, which we did. Make sure that you stay tuned next week as we have a very special episode that you're really going to enjoy. Also, if you've not already done so, make sure you click on the link below. This is a special offer from Mynd. In there on the website, you're going to be able to find all the resources that Joe used to actually make this deal happen for himself, all the education content, all the videos, all the resources that Joe used, you will have access to, along with a very special offer from Mynd that is just for Bigger Pockets subscribers. So on behalf of Joe, Vivian, myself, Mynd Property Management, and Bigger Pockets, thank you for watching this episode, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.